globalization has economically destroyed the world. You've got at least 40 to 50,000 people who die every day worldwide from starvation, malnutrition, and diseases which can be cured for pennies, such as diarrhea. And if you ask one of these Malthusian oligarchs, don't you think that something should be done to raise the standard of living in Africa or South Asia? They'll say, no, we can't do that. That would wound the planet. That would oppress Mother Earth. So that's oligarchy. Class consciousness in this sense is absolutely essential. If you think that bankers are the same as you, you're wrong. F. Scott Fitzgerald once told Hemingway, you know, the rich are different from us. And Hemingway said, yeah, they have more money. And F. Scott Fitzgerald replied, no, it's something much deeper. It's a whole different world. To be an oligarch, to be a Rockefeller or something of this sort, means that you're in a completely different world with values which are the reverse of human values. Now, if you allow the oligarchs to continue to dominate, the destruction of world civilization is a matter of a few decades at the very, very most. So, choose.
The Earth's ruling elite are first and foremost monopoly men. The founder of the Rockefeller clan summed it up simply when he said, competition is a sin.
Rockefeller himself said that competition was a sin. And people quipped at that, thinking it was one of his little jokes. He made many jokes about saving pennies and stuff like this. But in reality, he was telling you a truth, that competition to a man like him, who worked for a much larger organization, competition truly was a sin. And the cartels that have been formed ever since have become much bigger, more powerful cartels which can literally command governments, sometimes to go to war on their behalf, have occurred.
The economic crash of 2008 and 2009 was an engineered crisis designed to cripple sovereign nations globally to make way for a world currency and a new Bank of the World.
China's holding, what, 1.5 trillion worth. All over the world, they're holding U.S. currencies. They want to get out of them in a way where they're not going to lose on their investments. There's going to be a world currency. There's going to be a new reserve currency. They're going to push it through the IMF. That's going to be the banksters that are going to be in charge of it. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen sooner rather than later.
There was also a question to Geithner, do you think that the U.S. dollar ought to be replaced? And he blew it. He had a moment of candor where he said, yeah, we're considering that. So on that day, the dollar went down 1% within a couple of minutes.
Chinese government proposal about a global currency and about the IMF regulations, the new IMF idea about, the general agreements to borrow and having a faster ability to disperse to emerging markets.
As I understand this proposal, it's a proposal designed to increase the use of the IMF's special drawing rights. We're actually quite open to that suggestion.
Timothy Geithner's comment about global currency is not off the table because it's not off the table and it's going to come. The whole world is ready to bail out of bucks. They just want to do it in a way where they're not going to lose on their investments. That's all that's going on.
All the people around the world, the Japanese who have $1 trillion, the Chinese who have $1 trillion, the Saudis have $1 trillion, the Europeans something similar, they're all going to dump it at the same time. The rush for the exits. And that will then create hyperinflation.
When America finishes supplying the manpower and the military for standardization of the world into the one system, and they want a secular world society with a hint of greening and Gia worship for sustainability reasons. America, as they're finishing off this agenda, they'll be pulling the rug from underneath Americans at home at the same time towards the latter stages.
When the dollar starts to slide, and this was always the nightmare of Paul Adolph Volcker, who is now sitting in the Obama White House, once the dollar starts to go, there's nothing to stop it. There's no useful way that you can stop it once it begins to gather momentum. So I think we're facing the probability of some form of dollar panic combined with hyperinflation sometime during the Obama presidency.
They're now pulling the rug away from under the feet of the people. They're becoming rapidly a non-manufacturing country. Any country that can't manufacture its own goods, even for self-defense, therefore is no longer sovereign, independent, and able to sustain itself, which tells you that this is all part of the plan.
It started with the very beginning, when you established that there was a Federal Reserve System given the power of the state to create money out of nothing, and to do so without any regard to the will of the people, without any regard to what's behind the money system. In other words, strictly political and economic motives for the bankers and the politicians. Once you granted that power to a group, the Federal Reserve System, the economic crisis was inevitable. This has happened before. Every time in history when the government was given the power, or a group of banks in conjunction with the government was given the power to expand the money supply at will, those economic systems always wound up in crisis and always collapsed. So there's no reason to believe that the United States was given some kind of a get-out-of-jail-free card, an exemption from the processes of history. So the economic crisis began at the very beginning, and as a matter of fact, when the founders of the Federal Reserve System met on Jekyll Island back in 1910 and were drafting the Federal Reserve Act, one of the things they discussed was how to pass on the inevitable losses to the taxpayers. They knew that inevitably something like this would happen, and they knew that there had to be some way to get out of it without destroying the banks, of course, because they were the banks. And they said, aha, we'll go into partnership with the government, we'll take our cartel agreement and pass it into law, call it the Federal Reserve Act, and we'll make the taxpayer come online and be responsible to bail us out if and when the failure finally comes.
What a rather informative piece, huh? Now maybe we're going to get you to start thinking. Start thinking for yourself. Do your own research. It's time to wake up that real, that intuition and start figuring out, is this what I want for my children? Is this what I want for my grandchildren? So with that in mind, I want to thank you for watching The Real Story. Do your own due diligence. Remember tonight's homework. Look up Executive Order 11,110 from John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And by the way, if he created U.S. notes, United States notes, how do you think the people in the banking oligarchs, those private banksters known as the Federal Reserve, how do you think they felt about it? But they told you it was a patsy, right? Yeah. Another thing to look up, one more homework, because you're thinking of Kennedy, and I'll throw this in. Find out about Robert Kennedy and the CIA and the day he was shot. And what was the director of the CIA's Middle East branch doing in the room? Was he a California Democrat, when he was in that convention hall? Also, what was the CIA director of the Far East doing in that room? I know he's from California, and he's also a Democratic supporter. And what was that CIA director of South America doing in that convention room? Yeah, and if Robert Kennedy was the Attorney General, that would have made him the #1 policeman, wouldn't it, in the country? And his brother had been assassinated. The president, right? And what was Robert Kennedy doing? He was for the war or against? I'll ask you now. Have they got to you? How's your mind? How's your patriotism? How's your family? Be careful when you watch the mainstream media. It's manipulated. So with that in mind, thanks for watching The Real Story, and I hope you enjoyed the show.
Question is, will they kill untold millions as they did in the last century? It is not the elite cockroaches that determine that. It is you.